You are not dreaming, Steelers Nation. The craziest move of the Pittsburgh Steelers 2025 offseason just went down. And today we are talking about the blockbuster trade between Minkah Fitzpatrick being sent to the Miami Dolphins in exchange for all-pro corner Jalen Ramsey and tight end Jonnu Smith, as well as a late round pick swap in the 2027 NFL Draft. Welcome into Steelers Talk Live. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. I'm coming to you from my to my house here in Minnesota. I'm on vacation actually, but when big news happens, we're making sure we're getting you guys live breaking news coverage on the Black and Gold. We can take a look here at the trade compensation. First, we got news of the Jalen Ramsey trade, and a lot of people kind of assumed that it was going to be Ramsey and then just like a draft pick. But we soon learn in a bevy of different tweets coming out from Schefter and Rappaport and all these different people, Pelissero, I think, was on it first, that not only is Jalen Ramsey a part of this trade, but Minkah Fitzpatrick, the all-pro safety team leader in the Steelers locker room, is being traded back to the Miami Dolphins, where he started his NFL career. Of course, there was that trade. The Steelers traded for him all those years back, and now he goes back to Miami to now play for Mike McDaniel and the Dolphins. And then not only that, but the Steelers also get tight end Jonnu Smith. Of course, there was all those reports a couple weeks back that the Steelers were trying to acquire Smith from the Dolphins, and now the Steelers not only get Smith, but they also get Jalen Ramsey. So before we get into my thoughts and what I think the aftermath of this trade is going to look like, let me know down there in the comments section and grade this trade for the Steelers. Give me an A, a B, a C, a D, or an F. I'm going to give my thoughts on this here in just a second, give my grade for this trade in just a second. But let me know down there in the comments section, what are you guys thinking? Oxtail Cook is saying it's a B. Frey is giving it an A. Voxy is giving it an A. Spice Creations is saying F the Steelers. They've pissed me off too much this offseason. Sorry you don't like it, Spice. We've got Owen giving it a B. El Camo's giving it a B. We've got Ezra giving it a B. Tyler's giving it a D. Got Blaze giving it an A-. Steelers Rare Goated giving it a B-. Got Campaign giving it an A. Seems like most people are giving this an A, even though in our live poll right now, grade the trade A, B, C, D, or F. 37% are giving it an A in the chat. 39% are now 40% giving it a B. So it seems like most of the feelings on this trade are mostly positive. And my thoughts on this, guys, plain and simply, is you get a guy in Jalen Ramsey that's going to be able to help your secondary, be a very great versatile piece. All right, Minkah Fitzpatrick, obviously just a safety, can play a little bit in the slot too. But I think that Minkah was somebody that was getting older. We saw that his production went down quite a bit. He's only had one interception the last 2 years. We haven't seen him make the kind of level of impact plays as we're used to seeing from him. And for somebody that was taking up a large portion of the Steelers cap, I mean, this year, if I'm not mistaken, let me see, his cap hits, like, there was supposed to be $22.3 million against the cap this year, Minkah was, and then 24.4 next year. So if he had another kind of down year, we're talking about Minkah Fitzpatrick as somebody that was one of the most expensive safeties in the league, not necessarily living up to that dollar amount. So now most of that money gets off the Steelers' books. $15.5 million of this year's cap hit was supposed to be in base salary. That now shifts to the Miami Dolphins. Then next year, $17.6 million in base salary also transfers to the Miami Dolphins. So you get Minkah Fitzpatrick off the books. Now, obviously, I'm not happy necessarily that Minkah is gone. He was somebody that was an awesome Steeler, super intelligent player. And he was a great leader in the locker room too. He was I'm shocked that Mike Tomlin agreed to trade him. All right. Because Minkah's the type of guy where he is allowed to go into the coaches' meetings every single week post the game. And he's allowed to go into the coaches' meetings, and players usually aren't allowed to do that. So he was somebody that Mike Tomlin trusts indicatively. And the fact that Tomlin was willing and able to let him go here in exchange for Jalen Ramsey is shocking to me. I did not think that Minkah was going to be on the table, but now that I know that he's leaving, I know that, that the money aspect of it was probably a big aspect of it, because let's face it, Minkah is not the same player that he was when he got this contract. And, I don't think that he was necessarily worth the money that he was making here in Pittsburgh. I was happy to have him here. I think he's a good player. but, one interception in the last 2 years. His coverage grade has gone down in each of the last 2 years. Now, on the other hand, there, Jalen Ramsey is also getting older. Now, Ramsey's Pro Football Focus grading, I think that his film and his versatility is more than what Minkah's is. I think Jalen, can play safety. He can play in that safety alignment if you want him to. It's going to be interesting to see if the Steelers end up moving him to safety full time. But if they want to play him at corner, he's really good in the nickel. That's where he's been at his best, both with the Los Angeles Rams and the Miami Dolphins. He's just so instinctive. And when he's allowed to play in that slot position and get his eyes on the quarterback and make plays on the football, he can be a legitimate game-changing type of player. Long arms, physical, can also play on the outside. So I'm really interested to see how this team is going to use Jalen Ramsey in this defense. Are they going to just put him at safety and say, go be Minkah Fitzpatrick's replacement at free safety? Are they going to say, we're going to put you at nickel in our nickel formations and then put you on the outside in our base formations? I think that that's probably what they would prefer to do. And then do they potentially bring in another defensive back, maybe somebody like a Justin Simmons, who is still a free agent, who is an interception machine? Do they bring in maybe Jordan Poyer, who is good friends with Aaron Rodgers, by the way? He's done ayahuasca retreats with Rodgers in the past. That was shown in Rodgers' documentary, which you can currently view on Netflix. Then there's the other aspect of this here where you get an offensive weapon too. You get Jonnu Smith, who, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens with the Steelers offense from a formation standpoint here, because now you are giving Jonnu Smith a 1 year, $12 million extension. So he's going to be here for at least 2 seasons, or at least he's going to be under contract for 2 seasons. And last year he was a top 5 tight end in all of football, guys. Over 880 yards receiving on over 85 catches. He had 8 touchdowns. He broke multiple Miami Dolphin single season records last year at that tight end position. He's an awesome yard after the catch threat, which gives the Steelers tight end room something that they didn't necessarily have with Pat Freiermuth. Freiermuth is more of a really good possession type tight end. He's really savvy finding those soft spots and zones. He's got great hands. He's really good running those seams and finding that soft spot in the coverage. Jonnu is more of the guy you get manufactured touches to. Aaron Rodgers loves to throw screens. The Steelers didn't really have anybody outside of maybe DK Metcalf that you can just throw the ball out there to and force a defense to bring down. Jonnu is going to be that designed touch guy in this offense. And what this means, guys, when it comes to adding Jonnu Smith and paying him what you're paying him, the Steelers are going to be living in multiple tight end sets, okay? And they kind of did that last year as well, but I don't think they necessarily had the receiving talent to be able to thrive in those types of formations. Now they do with Pat Freiermuth, who's your receiving type guy, your hands guy, your possession type tight end, and then you got your dynamic yak threat in Jonnu Smith in this offense as well. And of course, Arthur Smith knows Jonnu Smith quite well. He had him in Tennessee when he was the offensive coordinator there. He had him in Atlanta back in 2023 as well, where he had a pretty decent season. So I'm excited to see what this offense is going to look like. And the reason why I'm really excited about Jonnu Smith and this new kind of bigger, heavier style of Steelers offense is that they can be very versatile. Okay. Jonnu Smith has a really great athleticism, so he can be a legit receiving threat, especially when defenses now are probably going to be forced to play in their base formation. So they have less speed on the field. But then you also have Freiermuth, who's a legitimate receiving weapon. And it also reduces the need for the Steelers to add a wide receiver this offseason as well. I do not think the Steelers will they might add one more receiver to the group here, but Jonnu Smith is going to be on the field pretty much all the time. Like, that's going to be their next receiving weapon. Right now you got DK Metcalf. I think Roman Wilson will more often than not, if he can prove himself, will be out there as a wide receiver because he's a better run blocker than Calvin Austin III is. But Calvin as a third wide receiver, I'm perfectly cool with that. There was a report from Jeremy Fowler from ESPN today that Gabe Davis remains an option for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Apparently, Davis really enjoyed his visit in Pittsburgh, and the fact that that's getting out lets me know that Davis's people are letting Jeremy Fowler know we want to go to Pittsburgh. So we'll see if the Steelers are interested. and Gabe Davis, and he would certainly bring another big body, another deep threat, another really good run blocker to the Steelers offense. But, what the biggest question that I have on my mind right now, guys, is what are they going to do at safety? Is their plan just to put Jalen Ramsey there and just have him replace Minkah Fitzpatrick? If that's the case, I don't love it. I think Ramsey's at his best when he's allowed to move around the formation, do all those different things. Also, keep in mind, guys, that Juan Thornhill is pretty much healthy for the first time in the last several years. He did play through a bevy of injuries in Cleveland last year. The film is not good with him, but he is a former Super Bowl winning free safety. So maybe they feel like he's good enough. He had an excellent offseason program. He only showed up for mandatory minicamp, but he had a really good 3 days at Steelers minicamp this year. And I thought he was going to be more of that bandit third safety that comes in and kind of roams the middle of the defense, looks for interceptions. He is a ball hawk. But maybe their plan is to have Juan Thornhill as that free safety, and then maybe a guy like Sebastian Castro out of Iowa, the UDFA, that I'm really, really high on, can be that bandit player when they do go to 3 safety packages. They've got options here. Like I mentioned earlier, you could also get a Justin Simmons in free agency. I don't think he's going to be too expensive. Last year, he kind of had that prolonged free agency as well, ends up going to the Atlanta Falcons. I do think Jordan Poyer, who is Rodgers' friend, could be an option as well. I don't like that option as much as I like Simmons, though. Simmons is a much better player than Poyer, in my opinion. But I would prefer for Ramsey's role to be your number 1 corner in base formation. So that's when you go to your 2 cornerback sets on the outside. And then when you go to your nickel sets where you have 3 corners on the field, I want him in the slot. That's where I want him. He doesn't quite have the athletic tools that he once had, but he still has the instincts. So that's why I think that he would be best suited to play in the nickel more often than not in the Steelers defense. It's also worth noting that you had the late round pick swap here. But at the end of the day here, I think that, the Steelers have a bunch of draft picks in the 2026 NFL draft. They didn't include any of those in this deal. So obviously those are important to work on, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. If you guys have questions, if you guys want to get on the show today, you guys can send in a super chat. You guys can send in a donation of any kind. And you guys can send in your Venmos and PayPals as well. We actually get to keep more of the proceeds when you guys send in donations via Venmo and PayPal. So you can find me at Jack Sperry on Venmo, at Captain Jack Rabbit on PayPal. You guys can also send in super chats throughout the show here that producer Sam is going to be putting up on screen as they come in. But a lot to talk about today, guys. There's a lot of different people that are going to be connected to the Pittsburgh Steelers now after this trade. Gabe Davis, those talks are going to continue after the Fowler report. The Justin Simmons conversation is going to be a very interesting one over the next several days. And, if the Steelers add Justin Simmons, that is a major, major shakeup in the Steelers secondary that I'm really on board for. But we'll see just how much and just how favorably the Steelers feel about Juan Thornhill, because if they love Thornhill, they're probably just going to put him at free safety and he's going to be their starter at that position this year. But if they feel like he's still at his best at that bandit role, coming off those injury-filled seasons, then Justin Simmons might be a legitimate option for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year, especially because I don't expect him to be super expensive. By the way, since 2017, I just thought of this, since 2017, when it comes to forced turnovers from his individual player, forced fumbles and interceptions, the top 2 players on that list, number 1 is TJ Watt with 40. Number 2 on that list with 33 is Justin Simmons. So obviously Watt, Simmons getting older. There's a reason why, they've accrued those numbers since 2017. But Simmons is a ball hawk. He played pretty decently last year for the Atlanta Falcons as well. Had 2 interceptions, not as much as kind of like his prime seasons in Denver. But, they kind of asked him to play a little bit of a funky role there with that Raheem Morris scheme in Atlanta, where in Pittsburgh, he would be asked to play his true free safety role, which is where he is more comfortable, where he really thrived in Denver. So I will say this is probably a possibility here. I think Justin Simmons is a good player. He won't be that expensive. So if you wanted to find a true Minkah Fitzpatrick replacement at safety and you don't feel like Juan Thornhill is going to provide that for you, absolutely go get Justin Simmons. But based on everything that I've heard about Juan Thornhill at Steelers OTAs is that he is looking great. He's looking healthy. And the Steelers really, really like him. So I would not be surprised whatsoever if Juan Thornhill is the starting free safety. I will have my premonitions about that because his film, frankly, has not been good the last several years. But apparently he's been dealing with injuries and playing through those injuries. And hopefully he comes back fully healthy this year and has a bounce back year if he is the starting free safety for the Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, guys, get down there in the comment section and let me know, is the defense better or worse after this trade? Type B if you think it's better, or type W if you think it's worse. I think it's better because you do have a little bit more versatility from your star defensive player in Jalen Ramsey. I think Ramsey has been better on film than Minkah has been over the last several seasons. And I think that Ramsey is a better player than Minkah Fitzpatrick at this point in time. That's just my personal opinion. But let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Better or worse? Chat's going absolutely nuts right now. We got Voxy giving it a B. Lisk saying it's worse. Gary Frank says there's no difference. Cool Cars says let's get Tyreek next. I don't think that's going to happen. That'd be crazy if that comes out. We got D. Lewis giving this trade an A. Major Ackerman saying it's the same. Craig says sign Amari Cooper or trade for Dobbs, trade for Jesse Bates, or just sign Justin Simmons, then a Super Bowl incoming. Like I said, guys, I don't necessarily think the Steelers are going to be super into getting another receiver here because you're paying Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith enough money where you have to play them both for a large majority of the snaps of the season. And if that's the case, you're only going to have two receivers on the field at one time. And sometimes they're going to be in 13 personnel a lot too, guys. Darnell Washington, especially on early downs, they're going to be living in 13 personnel where you've got DK Metcalf as your lone receiver, and then you got Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith, and Darnell Washington as a true blocking tight end in especially on first and second down. That's what the Steelers are going to want to live in because Darnell is essentially a sixth offensive lineman. He's that big, and then you got Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith that give you the not only the size advantage, especially if the defense wants to play nickel against the Steelers, but also it gives you the versatility to pass the football because Pat and Jonnu are both excellent receiving targets. So, I think if you're hoping that they're going to sign Amari Cooper, or if you're hoping they're going to trade for Romeo Dobbs at this point, I don't think it's going to happen. I've been wrong before. We'll see what they end up doing. I wouldn't necessarily hate it if they signed Amari Cooper, especially for the right price. But, the Steelers have not shown a lick of interest in Amari Cooper. And frankly, I think if they wanted him on this team, they would have had him. But the reality about Amari Cooper is, guys, he doesn't run block. All right. That's his reputation. He doesn't give a lot of effort as a run blocker. And that's going to not sit too well with Arthur Smith, the offensive coordinator. So Roman Wilson, it's going to be interesting to see if he really establishes himself as this team's number 2 receiver, because I think that opportunity is there for him. All right. He's a better run blocker than Calvin just because Calvin is 160 pounds. He just doesn't have enough functional strength to hold up as a run blocker when you go to your 12 personnel looks. So I think Roman has every opportunity to establish himself as this team's legit number 2 this year. And then Calvin is an excellent number 3 when you do have to go with more speed, when you do have to go more pass heavy, and get maybe Jonnu off the field on those 3rd and long situations. So definitely going to be interesting. We got our first super chat coming in that we'll get to here in just a second. Again, guys, if you send in any dollar amount super chat, we will make sure to get you on the screen today. And we'll be live as long as you guys want to be live today, because this is obviously a crazy moment. The day coming in. This one's from my man Steelers Dad, getting in the first super chat of the day. Says something I never thought I'd see. This offseason has been a head scratcher. Listen, man, I remember going into this offseason talking about trades, talking about free agency, talking about all this different stuff. And people are like, oh, the Steelers never make trades. Oh, the Steelers never do this. It's not the Steelers way. And I just kept telling them, Omar Khan is not Kevin Colbert, guys. Omar Khan is aggressive. He's going to make moves. He's going to do things. We've seen this over the Omar Khan tenure here in Pittsburgh, that he's not afraid to do these kinds of things. And obviously the Steelers feel like Minkah Fitzpatrick is on the decline. And for somebody that was, I mean, a safety, okay, Minkah Fitzpatrick is a safety. And you were paying his cap charge was over $20 million per season for somebody that was getting you over the last 2 years, a half of an interception per season. Like, you got to have more impact if you're going to be paying a safety that much money. And I love Minkah. All right. I think he was an awesome player. I think he's an awesome Steeler. I think that, maybe he's taken a little bit too much flack for the lack of production, but plain and simply, guys, like, that is a lot of money and a lot of cap resources to put towards one player that isn't, frankly, Deshaun Elliott had more impact plays, more TFLs. He was around the ball more often last year than Minkah was. And, talent evaluators around the league have noticed a decline in Minkah's overall impact on the football game. And that's just the reality of the situation. And the Steelers feel like Jalen Ramsey, with his versatility, him being able to play safety, him being able to play in the slot, him being able to play on the outside, gives this team more answers. And frankly, Jalen's been better on film than Minkah has as a player over the last several years. So I think the Steelers, from a talent acquisition perspective, did a good job here. Jonnu Smith fits what the Steelers offense wants to do. It's going to give the Steelers a true identity on offense, and their offense, guys, this year is going to be more unique than any offense in the National Football League. Okay. Because they're going to have 2 and 3 tight ends on the field for most of the plays on offense this year. It's going to be over 50%. It might be over 60, 65, maybe even get up to 70% of the plays on offense this year are going to be in 12 and 13 personnel. And that's exciting to me, because that means you're probably going to have the size advantage on most people. All right. Like, you're going to have the size advantage on most teams. And a lot of teams want to play in 2 high safeties. A lot of teams want to play in nickel. And if the Steelers are out there in 2 and 3 tight ends, they're going to have the blocking advantage out there for Caleb Johnson. They're going to have the blocking advantage out there for Jaylen Warren. And that's going to help out the run game. But you also have the receiving chops out there as well, with Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith, to be able to be versatile. So Steelers Dad coming in here. Appreciate the $5 Steelers Dad. We got a couple more super chats rolling in here that we'll get to momentarily. But make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We're going to be taking questions all throughout the live show here, and we might even do a mailbag cut here in a few minutes if we get enough questions. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Whenever a big move happens, we're going to be covering the ramifications of this trade and everything that comes after it here over the next several days. So make sure you click that subscribe button in case they sign Gabe Davis, in case they sign Justin Simmons. If those things happen, we're going to have more breaking news coverage for you guys on this channel. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button. Okay, so we got another one here from Mo Skino. Says, I'm just heartbroken over Fitz, but it's a deal. Ramsey is still a dog. Yeah, and man, I love Minkah too. You guys know Minkah is one of my favorite, was one of my favorite Steelers. That's kind of crazy to say that he's not a Steeler anymore, but I love Minkah. All right. He's an awesome player, great teammate, hard worker, instinctual, has been an first team all pro caliber player for a long time with the Pittsburgh Steelers. And obviously one of the best trades the Steelers have ever made was to acquire Minkah. And now, that doesn't necessarily mean that I think that this trade can't work out. I think that depending on what the Steelers do, especially if the Steelers bring in Justin Simmons, I think that this trade is absolutely worth it for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And if Juan Thornhill plays and he's really good this year for the team, then it's absolutely worth it. It is a little bit of a risk because you are getting rid of a team leader and a really good player in Minkah Fitzpatrick, but you are adding another really good player in Jalen Ramsey, and then you're adding an offensive weapon in Jonnu Smith. And obviously the Steelers honed in on Jonnu, right? The Steelers feel like they really wanted Jonnu. And if that was their guy, that tells you what I've been saying, guys, is that this is going to be the identity of this offense. It's going to be multiple tight ends. It's going to be big personnel. It's going to be versatility. That's going to be the identity of the Pittsburgh Steelers offense this year. And it's going to be the most unique offense in the NFL because nobody is going to run as much 12 and 13 personnel as the Steelers are going to run this year. I think Jonnu Smith is going to get a ton of manufactured touches as a screen threat. Aaron Rodgers loves to throw those quick screens when he sees something in the alignment of the defense, and Jonnu is going to be that big body yak threat for this team that Rodgers is going to absolutely spam if the defense is not going to properly align themselves to defend against the screen. And then if they don't defend against the screen, that's going to open up opportunities for the run game. So I actually kind of like the direction the Steelers offense is going here. And I'm excited not only for the future of the offense, but the defense as well. $5 again. Oh, never mind. $5 from Mexamander here. Says Steelers got rid of their best safety, Minkah. No good Ramsey is great, but Minkah was better. I would disagree with that, Mexamander. I've watched the film on both these guys, and as much as I love Minkah, and I still think, he's a top 10 safety, really good player. Last year had one interception and one forced fumble, one TFL. The year before that, no interceptions. His production has gone down, and his PFF grading has gone down as a result of that. I think that he has lost a step on film. He is getting older. And Jalen is still a really, really good player who, his PFF grading, he was a top 10 graded corner in all of football last year. So Jalen, even though these guys are kind of similarly aged and they're both getting older and they might be losing a little bit of a step athletically, I think Jalen Ramsey is better suited for this next stage of his career than maybe Minkah is. And Jalen, I think, also plays a bevy of different positions better than Minkah does. The Steelers put Minkah in the slot 2 years ago, and he didn't honestly play all that well. But I think Ramsey can actually play a pretty decent safety. That's what their plan is for him. And then I think that he's really good in the slot. I think that's where he's at his best, and he's still more than capable on the outside as well. So as much as I'm heartbroken that Minkah is no longer a part of this team, and I completely understand why people in this fan base would be upset that he's a part of this deal, I still think that this defense is going into the year next year slated to be one of the best, if not the best in football. I truly believe that. And that's even more true if they add a guy like Justin Simmons. So I'm really excited about the future of this team, both sides of the ball. And, I'm sad that Minkah's no longer a part of the team, but I'm also excited about, the nature of this move and what it means for the future of the Steelers. $5 from Jack. How do I say this here? Corniashin? I'm not even going to try. Jack, I appreciate you. Says, what do you think about playing Peyton Wilson at safety? Dude can be Cam Chancellor, but faster. Great coverage, but not getting off blocks. I think he's going to do a better job getting off blocks this year. I don't necessarily disagree with the idea that they could go to 3 linebacker sets this year, and Wilson kind of plays a hybrid safety linebacker role. That's certainly in the cards, especially if Juan Thornhill is playing free safety, because Wilson is known more as a coverage linebacker. He has put on some weight this offseason, and the Steelers kind of feel like he can ascend to an every down role this year. But you also have Cole Holcomb, who's more of like a traditional, bigger linebacker that can play against the run as well. So if Cole Holcomb's playing particularly well, Steelers can absolutely go with Patrick Queen and Cole Holcomb as your true, linebacker types, and then Peyton Wilson can be almost your bandit player in there. So that'll be an interesting discussion, Jack. That's a good point to bring up for sure. But he is a little bit big to play a true safety kind of role, but in kind of a bandit role where he's allowed to roam in the middle of the defense and just be a coverage player. That's absolutely in the cards. And it also gives the Steelers versatility against the run as well, because obviously you're putting more mass on the field, having 3 linebackers on the field. So that's certainly a part of the conversation here, Jack. I think it depends on how good Cole Holcomb's going to be coming off that injury, because they have to be able to trust him on the field as well. You also have Harrison, who you brought in free agency, that they might be able to trust out there as well. So don't hate that idea whatsoever. And yeah, that's where I'm at right now. Make sure you guys get those super chats in, or hashtag Steelers. We're going to be doing a mailbag on today's show, guys. So if you got a question surrounding the Jalen Ramsey trade, about the future of the Steelers, if you just want to vent and want to say that this trade sucks, or if you want to say you love this trade, just put hashtag Steelers along with your question down there in the live chat, and we'll be getting into it. Sure thing, Sam. So for those of you that are just joining us, the Steelers have made a blockbuster trade to acquire Jalen Ramsey. It was announced this morning, but then in the minutes to come, we also learned that Minkah Fitzpatrick was a part of this deal. But the Steelers also get Jonnu Smith, the tight end, in this deal as well. So the Steelers get the cornerback target that they were targeting and their offensive weapon that apparently they were targeting in Jonnu Smith. So we talked a lot on this channel about wide receiver targets. We talked about Romeo Doubs. We talked about Amari Cooper. We talked about Keenan Allen. We talked about all these possibilities at the receiver position. But it seems like Arthur Smith's vision for the Steelers offense is to pretty much live in multiple tight end sets, 12 and 13 personnel, and this move all but confirms that plan. And I'm very excited to see what that kind of offense can look like, because you got some dogs that are very versatile players. Pat Freiermuth, Jonnu Smith can both block and pass or catch. Obviously, if you're asking neither one of those guys to dig up a defensive end, they're not going to do too well. But the guy that you have to be that kind of edge rusher digger is going to be Darnell Washington, who is awesome. All right. Darnell Washington is awesome at that. One of the best blocking tight ends in the league. He's going to be your true wide tight end. And then you've got Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith, who can be very versatile pieces that can be used as receivers. And obviously they have the size advantage versus, say, a safety that they have to climb to and block. So it's going to give the Steelers an advantage in the run game. It's going to give the Steelers versatility to also pass the football while maintaining that size advantage against the modern NFL defense here, which is very light. It's very nickel and dime heavy. It's a lot of DBs. It's a lot of speed. And what this new school kind of Steelers offense is going to be attempting to do is get defenses on a week-to-week basis to play against what they're used to playing. They're going to have to play in base formation where they only have two corners on the field. They have more linebackers on the field, and they got more size on the field, and they're going to have to play football that way, which is something that they're not going to be used to doing on a week-to-week basis just because of all the speed and the pass heaviness of the modern NFL game. So I think that this is very, very interesting what the Steelers are doing on offense this year. And I think that it might just work. I think that with Caleb Johnson coming in, who's an excellent outside zone rusher, Jalen Warren, who's an excellent third down back, and now you got the versatility that you have on offense. Like, I think that this might be something that's really, really good for the Pittsburgh Steelers on offense. Then on defense, like you trade, an older, declining safety in Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's still a good player. I'm not trying to say he's not a good player, but he is declining. You get the money, the base salary that you had on him off the books, and you replace that with not one, but two players, which are going to help you this year. Jalen Ramsey is an awesome defensive player, guys. He's versatile. He can play in a bunch of different alignments. The Steelers are going to be able to do a lot of fun stuff with him. And I do think he's a better player than Minkah Fitzpatrick is at this stage of their respective careers. That's just my personal opinion, but that is how I feel at this point in time. But yeah, okay. So we got another one here, another super chat coming in, $5 coming in from I Might Sell. It says 4th round pick for Dobbs, sign Simmons, and extend TJ. So obviously extend TJ Watt. That's certainly going to happen. I just don't expect the Steelers to trade him under any circumstances. I would be on board with signing Simmons. I'd be excited about that. I will say, though, I don't think a trade for a wide receiver is going to happen. I think that this is their move for an offensive weapon. And the reason for that is because you've got in the wide receiver room DK Metcalf, who was your big acquisition via trade this year. This team still does believe in Roman Wilson. They are very excited about the offseason that he had this year, and they still believe in him. Hell, they spent a 3rd-round pick on him. And then they have Calvin Austin III, who I think was one of the most efficient receivers in football last year when he got the football. So I think because you're going to be living in that 12 and 13 personnel world where you're only going to have 2 and sometimes 1 receiver on the field at any given time, like you don't need like a super deep wide receiver room. You just need 2 to 3 guys that you trust, because you're pretty much never going to be going into 4 receiver sets. The most that you're going to have on the field at one time is 3. And I think the Steelers probably like the 3 that they have. So I would be fine if they got Romeo Doubs. I think that, big body route runner, has chemistry with Rodgers. I'm not saying that I would mind the trade. I just don't think it's going to happen. I think that this was the move that they wanted to make for an offensive playmaker. I think Smith does provide that. And we'll see what ends up happening. But I think that this was Omar Khan's move. And I think that after this, there's probably not going to be another Steelers trade for the rest of the offseason. They might make a signing. They might sign if they're going to add a receiver. Honestly, I think at this point, the most likely option is Gabe Davis. Because he does bring a lot of size. He does bring a run blocking skill set to the table that Amari Cooper, frankly, doesn't. And if they add another receiver, I think that Gabe Davis would probably be the guy. But at this point, I just don't see them spending a draft pick, especially next year when it's very clear that they have been very protective of these draft picks in 2026. I mean, even in this trade here, guys, they sent a 2027 fifth round pick. They could have easily made that a 2026 fifth round pick. They got multiple, but they didn't. So obviously they're being pretty protective with those 2026 draft picks. And now that they're going to be living in 12 and 13 personnel, I just don't think that they're going to make getting another receiver a priority, and they're going to see if Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin III, if those guys, one of them at least, can assume that number 2 receiver role. So you can have your misgivings about that. Absolutely, I can certainly understand that, but especially because Roman is completely unproven, and Calvin, I don't think has ever had over 600 yards in a season. So I can certainly understand why some people would be upset with that. But if you get another receiver, what are you going to do with Roman? What are you going to do with Calvin? You're just going to sit him on the bench? I feel like you're pretty much wasting a 3rd round pick in that case with Roman. And then with Calvin, I think you're missing out on a chance to get him on the field more often, where I think that he's going to have a really good season this year. I really do. Last year, he was mostly the secondary read in the progressions for the quarterbacks. And as we've covered extensively on this show, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields were extremely, extremely, extremely dependent on that primary read. So if you watch the film from last year, Calvin Austin III is wide open all the time, and he's not getting thrown the football because Russell Wilson and Justin Fields didn't see him. I don't think that'll be the case with Aaron Rodgers. He's one of the greatest football minds of our time. Great mental processor still. If anything, he's gotten better with his mental processing, and the physical attributes have gone down, but he's going to see Calvin Austin when he gets open. All right. So I think that the Steelers are probably cool with where they're at receiver wise. If Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin just completely suck this year, I do think they'll probably make a move for a receiver at the deadline. Maybe if Gabe Davis is still available at that point, they probably sign him, but I don't think there's going to be a big splash trade for a wide receiver here in Pittsburgh. I think this was the move for the offensive playmaker. Then we go on from Joshua Bailey, $5. Appreciate you, Joshua. Says, I hope we have a terrible season so Omar and Mike Tomlin get fired. I certainly don't agree with that, Joshua. I hope we have an awesome season. I'm always going to cheer for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I'm guessing you're probably a big Minkah Fitzpatrick fan, and you're very upset that they got rid of him. Can certainly understand that. He was one of my favorite Steelers as well. Great guy, great person, great teammate. And the Steelers locker room just lost a really good person. So I think that needs to be said. But I'm never gonna cheer for the Steelers to suck. I'm hoping that they have a great season, and that all the moves that they have made this offseason, and they have made a lot of moves, pays off. I really hope that. So Joshua, appreciate the 5. Got a couple more super chats rolling in here. Glenn James, or actually we're going to Keyshawn here first. Keyshawn Banis with a 2 says, with our defensive line and DB room, we don't need a hybrid safety. And that might be true, Keyshawn. I will say, another person to keep in mind with this discussion, guys, when they go to their dime packages is probably Corey Trice Jr. because he's big, he is physical, he's got long arms, and he played pretty well in that dime position last year before he got that injury. Remember, he had that interception against the Broncos. So he's another guy you got to keep in mind with this kind of alignment when you go to your 6 DB sets. But, it will be interesting to see if they get Justin Simmons, because I think Simmons would want to play here. And if the Steelers want him, I think he probably would sign here. But the question is, do they want Thornhill enough to make him their bona fide starting free safety? And I think that is certainly a possibility, but we shall see. Justin Simmons last year, not bad at all. I think, he didn't have the greatest season in the world, which is why Atlanta's not bringing him back. But I will say Justin isn't necessarily the greatest fit for a cover 4, cover 6 style defense like Atlanta runs. I think he's much better as a true free safety. where he's allowed to play center field. And the Steelers play a lot of those types of coverages, single high safety coverages, where the free safety is allowed to roam and, be a ball hawk. And, Juan Thornhill, if he's fully healthy, I think could potentially fill that role. But I think Justin Simmons could have a big time bounce back season this year in Pittsburgh if that's the move they decide to make. So essentially, when it comes to that free safety position, I'm kind of cool with what the Steelers whatever the Steelers think is the right decision there. But yeah, Keyshawn, I would say right now, I think the Steelers are still in a pretty decent spot. I still think, even if the Steelers don't get Justin Simmons, I still think this is going to be a top 5 defense in the league. They have the best pass rush in the league. And you added to it this offseason in Derek Harmon. I think the linebacking room is going to be really good this year, even though you lost to Landon Roberts. I think Peyton Wilson's going to have a hell of a season this year. And then in the secondary, I think that it's pretty darn good. We'll see how Thornhill plays if he is the starter. And if he stinks, that's going to create a massive hole in the Steelers defense that we're going to look back in hindsight and say, what are you doing? But, obviously, if the Steelers make this move and they stick with Juan, obviously Mike Tomlin and Omar Khan feel comfortable enough doing that. And if it fails, it likely means Mike Tomlin's going to get fired. So we'll see what ends up happening there. $2 from my man, Mander. Who says trade Roman and Calvin for a better wide receiver. It's not going to happen. They like both of them. Meximander. You may not, but the Steelers really like Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin. Now, obviously, Roman didn't play last year. And, he's completely unproven. So I completely understand the hesitancy to just crown him this team's number 2 wide receiver heading into the year. And by the way, I still think that the chances of them grabbing a guy like Gabe Davis is still possible. It seems abundantly clear Gabe wants to play in Pittsburgh and is probably willing to take a bare bones contract to be able to come play here. But Roman is the type of guy where I think this team fell in love with him as a potential number 2 wide receiver 2 years ago when they drafted him in the 3rd round. He's a really good run blocker. He's a dog competitor. He's got incredible acceleration and speed to win on crossers. He's got super reliable hands, like some of the most reliable hands in the draft last year, in my opinion, where he catches everything with his hands. He's good in scramble drill as well. I think people are kind of sleeping on Roman Wilson a little bit. And then if he doesn't play well, you got Calvin Austin III, who, brings multiple elements to the passing game as a receiver. He's a great yak threat. He's got great vision with the ball in his hands in space. Obviously, he's got that dynamic speed that can also make him a vertical threat to take the top off the defense. And then last year he added some really good things to his route running game that I thought were very, very encouraging. Obviously, some of the production in terms of total numbers weren't there because Russell Wilson and Justin Fields, like I talked about, just didn't get him the football enough. But his passer rating per target last year was over 130. All right. He was one of the best receivers in the game when the quarterback threw him the football. And, his efficiency was off the charts. So when you are in your pass heavy situations, like Calvin is kind of your Z on the outside that could do everything for you. Yak, get open and take the top off the defense and be a vertical threat. And then Roman, he's 185 pounds, not the biggest guy in the world, but he blocks his ass off, does a lot of really good things. And I think that he is a good enough route runner to be able to potentially play that number 2 receiver role. Some people may disagree with me on that, but obviously if the Steelers don't add another receiver, that's their plan heading into the 2025 season. So we are doing a mailbag here momentarily here, guys. So make sure you guys get those questions in. You guys can put #Steelers down there in the comments section. Okay, so we need some more questions, guys. So get your questions down there in the live chat. #Steelers to get in on the action. So all you have to do is go down there in the live chat room, put #Steelers, and then put your question behind it. So, for example, #Steelers. Will the Steelers win the Super Bowl this year? Or whatever question you have. And then I'll answer it on the mailbag today. Also, if you want to guarantee your question gets on the mailbag today, you guys can super chat any dollar amount to get in on the action. Greatly appreciate your guys' support. And I think we got one from Glenn James that we haven't got to yet, Sam, that we'll get to here in just a second. But you guys can also send in your donations via Venmo or PayPal. You can find me at Jack Sperry on Venmo or at Captain Jackrabbit on PayPal. $10 from Glenn James. Appreciate you, Glenn. Says Rodgers will be throwing it to trees. who is going to be the other starting inside linebacker. Holcomb is looking like a stud in camp. As far as Minkah, he hasn't played well in a while. This is a great trade. You know, I definitely don't hate the trade, is what I'll say, Glenn. I am a little bit upset that Minkah's gone, but I understand why they got rid of him. At the same time, you know, I'm shocked that Mike Tomlin signed off on this because he loves Minkah Fitzpatrick. He loves him like a son. But obviously, they feel like Jalen Ramsey brings an element to this defense that's more important than what Minkah Fitzpatrick was bringing to this defense. And Minkah was slowing down. Let's face it, he was. One interception in the last 2 years for somebody that is slated to get an over $22 million cap hit for the next 2 years. One of the highest paid safeties in football. So if you're going to be paying a guy that much, like you gotta kind of live up to that production wise, and Minkah simply hasn't in the last 2 years. So I love Minkah. I wish him the best in Miami, but I'm also very excited about Jalen Ramsey because I think at this stage of their NFL careers, Ramsey is the better player. And I think that the defense is better today than it was yesterday. But, you know, you're really, if you don't add another safety, you are really depending on Juan Thornhill to have a major bounce back season because the film with him has not been good for a couple of years. So we'll see what happens there, but definitely going to be interesting what they do in that Steelers secondary after this massive move. It also means probably bad news for Beanie Bishop Jr. Unless they play Ramsey at safety, which is a possibility. Beanie is probably not going to play as a starter this year. He was having a really good offseason program. Now, Beanie's undersized, and because of that, he can be a liability in coverage and as a run defender. But he made some big-time plays and some big-time interceptions last year. So adding Jalen Ramsey, if he's going to be your nickel corner moving forward that plays on the outside in your base formations to give Darius Slay a little bit of a break from time to time, you know, Beanie's not going to be on the field that much. So he'd probably be one of the bigger losers of this trade, especially if Ramsey does play the cornerback position more often than not. But that's pretty much the way the cookie crumbles with these kinds of trades. Heath, my man, $5, appreciate you. Says, hey, I think I heard this may make Minkah look bad in Steelers fans' eyes. Is this true? No, I think that Steelers fans really appreciate Minkah. And if you're on Twitter today bashing Minkah or saying that he sucks or I'm glad he's gone, like I would say refrain from that kind of talk. Minkah was an awesome player for this organization. He's a great teammate, great locker room presence. He's essentially like a coach on the field. I think someday he's going to make a hell of a coach. And, you know, let's face it, guys. Like people were talking about, you know, this year being Minkah's last year in Pittsburgh anyway. Like people were talking about, you know, potentially trading Minkah next offseason anyway, because he is getting older, because he is so expensive. And, you know, with this, you know, you get Minkah's contract off your books a year early, but you add two players that can really, really help your defense this year, while maybe getting ahead of a true, you know, decline type of season from Minkah Fitzpatrick. Because let's face it, you know, he has not been the Minkah of old. I mean, 2022, he had 6 interceptions, 11 PBUs. Like he was all over the place, making plays, all pro caliber player. Within the last 2 years, right, the PBU numbers have gone down dramatically. The interception numbers obviously have gone down dramatically. And, you know, I wish him the best of luck, and I think he's still a good player. But, you know, if he was the price tag to go out and get Jalen Ramsey and then Jonnu Smith to help both your offense and your defense get better, like I understand why the Steelers did it. Now, obviously, they're banking on, you know, Roman Wilson to be able to, you know, establish himself as this team's number 2 receiver. They're banking on Juan Thornhill to be able to establish himself once again as a starting caliber free safety if they don't make a move for Justin Simmons. But at the end of the day here, guys, like you're getting a really freaking good player in Jalen Ramsey that can play a bunch of different roles. It gives you some versatility. It allows you to do some very fun things disguise-wise as well. And, you know, I wish Minkah the best of luck, but, you know, I can see why the Steelers made this move. $5 from Mexamander. Says, how about Steelers sign one of these receivers, Chris Godwin? Well, Chris Godwin is on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Marquise Brown, he's on the Chiefs. Keenan Allen, he's a free agent and has said he doesn't want to play in Pittsburgh. Brandon Cooks is on the Saints, and T. Higgins is on the Bengals. So none of those. I mean, Keenan Allen is the most realistic option between those. But, I'm just telling you guys right now, I think if they make a receiver move, it'll probably be for Gabe Davis. And that's probably where they're at, because the reality of the situation, guys, is you're going to be in 2 tight end sets pretty much all the time. So you only have, in those 2 tight end sets, unless you take your running back off the field, which the Steelers won't do, you're going to have 2 receivers on the field. And if you add another receiver, that means for most of the time, Roman Wilson, who you invested a 3rd-round pick in, and Calvin Austin III, who this team still likes, is going to be on the bench for a majority of snaps. And I just don't think the Steelers want to do that. I think the Steelers feel good enough about Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin III where they're cool with those 2 guys being their 2 and their 3. And then Robert Woods being their 4. And if Roman Wilson stinks, I think the Steelers feel good enough about Robert Woods to put him in there. So I honestly wouldn't be shocked if the Steelers don't make any moves at wide receiver before the start of the season. I think that they went out and they looked for an offensive playmaker. They wanted to add 1, not multiple. And obviously with the addition of Jonnu Smith, they have that guy. Now, maybe that changes because of the Donald Parham injury. Donald Parham was a backup tight end that tore his Achilles. Maybe Jonnu Smith is kind of the move to replace him, and they still want to get a wide receiver. Maybe that is still the case. And if that's the case, I think Gabe Davis is certainly in the conversation. I wouldn't mind a trade for Romeo Doubs. I wouldn't mind a signing of Amari Cooper. I wouldn't mind them making a wide receiver move. But, because they're going to be living in 2 tight end sets. And by the way, they have to do that because they're paying both Freiermuth and Smith. You're not paying these guys to sit them on the bench, right? You're just not doing that. So these 2 guys are going to be on the field all the time. All right. And, the only time where they will go to 11 personnel is when it's a obvious pass situation. So 2-minute drill, 3rd and long, 2nd and long, when it's just obvious that the Steelers need to pass the football. That's when they may go to those 3 receiver sets and take one of these guys off the field. But honestly, I think they'll be in 13 personnel, which means 3 tight ends with Darnell Washington on the field, more than they are in 11 personnel, which is 3 wide receivers. This is going to be a heavy offense. All right. And if you don't like that philosophy, that's just going to be too bad because that's what they're going to do. Arthur Smith, that's the way he loves it. That's the way he likes to do it. And the Steelers feel like with the defenses in the NFL getting, more centered around defending the pass and 2 high safeties and multiple DBs. They've kind of identified that elite rushing offenses are the teams that are winning, games en masse. Look at the Detroit Lions, look at the Philadelphia Eagles, look at the Baltimore Ravens. The teams that can run the football, effectively are the teams that are the elite offenses in the National Football League. So that's what the Steelers are trying to do here. They're trying to build a great run game, and they're trying to have versatility to also pass the football when they want to as well. Do we have another mailbag item here, Sam, or do we have another super chat, or should we go right into the mailbag here? All right, so guys, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go right into the mailbag here. We got some questions that we want to answer here. You guys can continue to get your questions in the chat room, #Steelers. If you want to give your take on the Jalen Ramsey trade here, if you want to ask me whatever question you want about the Steelers defense, about the wide receiver room, about what comes next after this trade, get your questions down there so that we can get you on the mailbag today. But Sam is getting our one more super. All right, we'll get to the super here. 2 more supers. All right, we'll get to these last 2 supers. Let's do them during the mailbag. And we'll get to those 2 in the mailbag. So appreciate you 2 getting those super chats in. Sounds good. So just to kind of recap here, guys, Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith are Pittsburgh Steelers. We have sent Minkah Fitzpatrick back to the Miami Dolphins in exchange for those 2, plus a late-round pick swap in 2027. We're going to be doing a mailbag here in about 30 seconds. But thank you guys so much for watching our live show. We're kind of doing an impromptu live show here because I am technically on vacation here, but hey, when breaking news happens, our promise to you guys, we're getting you Steelers content whenever that breaking news hits. So if more happens this week, we will continue to get more live coverage for you guys on this channel. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. And with that, let's get into the mailbag here in just a second. Welcome into Steelers Talk. I'm your host, Jack Sperry. It is mailbag time here after the Jalen Ramsey, Minkah Fitzpatrick, and Jonnu Smith trade. I'm sure you guys have a lot of questions because there's a lot of implications after this trade went down. So without further ado, let's get into the questions, and make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. I am on vacation right now, but when breaking news hits, we are getting you guys content on this channel every single time. We'll have more videos, probably at-home style like this one, all throughout the week. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button for the latest surrounding the black and gold. Our first one here comes from my man Jim Cease with a $5 super chat. Says, do you think we tried to get a safety now? Thoughts? I think that there is a chance that they could add a safety. Now, I think it depends here, Jim, on how they feel about Juan Thornhill. Obviously, they bring in Thornhill this offseason. He's a former Super Bowl champion as a starting free safety for the Kansas City Chiefs. He is a ball hawk. He is known, at least back in his heyday, as somebody that would get a lot of interceptions. Kind of felt like he may be a bandit safety this year, and he might if the Steelers plan on playing Jalen Ramsey at free safety. We'll see what the Steelers' plan is for Ramsey in this defense. But if they plan to play Ramsey mostly at corner, that means Thornhill assumes that role of the free safety if they don't make a move. If the Steelers feel like Thornhill is back to being healthy, Thornhill has said that he has dealt with and played through injuries over the last several years, and he hasn't had an interception since he was with the Kansas City Chiefs back in 2022, where he had 3 of them, and of course in a Super Bowl winning campaign for Kansas City. So the last 2 years, no interceptions, not a ton of production there with Cleveland. Honestly, his film has been frankly brutal. So if he comes in as the starting free safety and he's bad for the Steelers, that is going to be a major downgrade at the free safety position for Pittsburgh. So if the Steelers feel like they don't want to take that risk, they could get somebody like a Justin Simmons, who is still a free agent. A lot of interception production throughout his career. Had a down year with the Atlanta Falcons last year, but I thought that the fit in the defense there, kind of quarters heavy, palms heavy, cover 6 heavy defense that Raheem Morris runs there in Atlanta, didn't really fit his skill set. I think Justin Simmons is more of a true free safety, which is what he would be playing here in Pittsburgh. So I would love a Justin Simmons signing, but also if they feel good enough about Juan Thornhill, I think that might be what they do as well. So we'll see on that front. Also, Jordan Poyer is another option to consider. Poyer is one of Aaron Rodgers' best friends. He's gone on ayahuasca retreats with Rodgers in the past. And as Rodgers says in his documentary, there's no bond like a retreat brotherhood. So Poyer is another name to watch out for, but we'll see on the safety front. Got one from LT here with a $5 super chat. Says, what happened behind closed doors for the Steelers to agree to moving on from Minkah is unexpected. I always saw Minkah as a Steeler for life. I think what it comes down to here, guys, is that Minkah, his cap hit was just so large and he wasn't backing it up with the production he was putting on the field. I still think he's a good safety, still a really good player, but they're paying him like top 3 safety money, and his cap hit was getting to over $20 million per season. And for somebody that's just gotten 1 interception in the last 2 years, when that's kind of been his thing, is making big time impact plays, being around the football, doing all those things. I think the Steelers said, we really want Jonnu Smith, and I think the Dolphins probably said, we need Minkah Fitzpatrick back in the trade if we're going to be trading Jonnu Smith to you. And the Steelers felt like they were more willing to let go of Minkah than give up a high draft pick to be able to get Jonnu Smith on their roster. And they also get Jalen Ramsey in return for Minkah, and they probably feel like he's at least as good as Minkah is, if not better. So I think the Steelers feel like they're getting what they want out of this deal. Obviously, losing a guy like Minkah Fitzpatrick, the person in your locker room, sucks. He's an awesome guy, awesome teammate. I'm shocked Mike Tomlin decided to trade him because he loves Minkah as a person, allows him to sit in on defensive coaches meetings and all these different things. He's going to be, I wish him best of luck in Miami, but with his increasing age, his decreasing production, his decreasing athleticism, and a cap hit that's only getting higher, I don't think the Steelers necessarily wanted to trade Minkah, but they really wanted Ramsey and they really wanted Jonnu. And because of those two declining factors for Minkah, I think that they were willing to make this deal. Then we got one from LMV Gaming. Says, what's the Chris Olave situation look like? Steelers made a call to New Orleans. They were interested in Chris Olave as a potential offensive playmaker to add to this offense. The Saints essentially told them no, and that's been the extent of it. I really don't expect Chris Olave to be traded. And honestly, that would be kind of cruel to Tyler Shuck, their rookie quarterback, because they don't have much outside of Chris Olave there in New Orleans at the receiver position. He's still on an affordable rookie contract. There's just really no reason for the Saints to trade Chris Olave unless they feel like he's like one more concussion away from retirement. But it seems like the Saints want to keep him on their roster, so I wouldn't expect a trade for Chris Olave. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. Grade this trade for me down there in the comments section, A, B, C, D, or F. For me, I'm going to give this for now an A-. We'll see what they end up doing at the safety position, like we talked about. If they add a safety, if they decide to go with Thornhill, where they put Ramsey, do they play him at safety or DB? Obviously, we'll have to get answers to those questions before we really get a finalized grade. But right now, you're adding an offensive playmaker and a defensive playmaker while also getting rid of a declining player with a large cap hit. So at the end of the day, I think the Steelers probably feel pretty good about where they're at. So I'll give it an A-. This will be the pinned comment on today's show. YouTube's going to throw you an ad break here in just a couple of seconds. And when that happens, take advantage of that time by letting me know. And let me know your grade for the Minkah Fitzpatrick, Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith trade. Then we got one from Milton Sanchez, 524 here. Says, do you think if TJ and the Steelers can't come to terms on a contract, will he be traded? And if so, would you trade him for McLaurin? I'm not worried about the TJ Watt situation. Usually when a player and the team both want to get a deal done, it usually gets done. TJ wants to be a Steeler for life. The Steelers want him to be a Steeler for life. So I expect them to come to terms on at least one more contract extension here. I still think he's young enough where he can still be a very high level player for the next at least 2-3 years, while he's still on that next contract extension, the next 3-4 years potentially. He's arguably still, he's definitely still a top 3 defensive player in football, arguably the best defensive player in football right now. So he's probably asking for a lot of money. And, maybe part of this deal with Minkah Fitzpatrick was they felt like they wanted more cap space for the future so that they could make a deal with TJ Watt. It wouldn't shock me if that was part of why the Steelers decided to let go of Minkah Fitzpatrick here. The cap hit for Jalen Ramsey is not very high whatsoever. They are paying him quite a bit in cash this year, especially with an option bonus that kicks in week 1. But, the cap hit's not too bad for Ramsey this year. And then you pretty much cut him next offseason. And then maybe, hopefully, he plays well enough where he earns another deal with the Steelers. But this opens up a lot of cap space to potentially get a TJ Watt deal done and make him one of, if not the highest paid defensive player in football. So I don't think a trade is really on the table, Milton. I would be absolutely shocked if they trade him. But then again, I'm surprised they traded Minkah, so who knows? We got one here from Steelers Prods. It says, if we don't sign a safety, is Caleb Downs an option in the draft next year? Downs is probably going to be a top 5 pick, if not top 10 pick. And the Steelers are going to use their first-round pick most likely on a quarterback. Obviously with Rodgers likely heading into the final season of his career, Steelers want to make sure they get their franchise quarterback, and what's going to be a very quarterback-rich draft next year. There might be like 5, 6, maybe even more first-round quarterbacks next year. It's going to be a really good QB class, and the Steelers are going to have a lot of options there, and that's why they passed on a quarterback this year. They felt like they had a better chance of finding their franchise guy in 2026 as opposed to 2025, which was absolutely the case, by the way. Shedeur Sanders, I think, probably would have been a bust here. He's probably not even going to make the final Cleveland Browns roster at this point. And then, the guys after that, Jackson Dart, I think he's got a limited upside. I would have been okay with Milroe, to be honest with you, but there's better options than Milroe in next year's draft. So I like the decision from Pittsburgh to bring in Rodgers and then get their quarterback next year. So unless Rodgers comes back for another season, or if Will Howard, plays well enough in practice this year to be the guy heading into 2026, I don't think Caleb Downs is really an option for the Steelers next year. Then we got one from number one Steelers. Says, what are we going to do with Darnell Washington? If he's a fullback, then what will he do with Connor Hayward? So Hayward had kind of a down season last year. It would not shock me if he gets cut from this team, unfortunately. But they also might keep Connor as a fullback. And what they're going to do is that they will play a lot of 13 personnel, which means 13 tight ends, or not 13 tight ends, 3 tight ends on the field at one time. Especially on early downs. Like on first down, expect Darnell Washington to be in there and in line, true blocking tight end, essentially a 6th offensive lineman that's also eligible to catch the football. And then you got Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith, who would be asked to climb, take on linebackers, safeties, and their blocking assignments, which they are more than capable of doing. They also have the size advantage if the opposing team decides to go to nickel or dime packages. This is the vision for the Pittsburgh Steelers. They want to bully people. They want to be bigger than you. They want to be tougher than you, but they also want to have the receiving chops out there at the tight end position to be able to beat you through the air with Aaron Rodgers. And Pat Freiermuth and Jonnu Smith not only provide the size advantage in the run game, but they also provide the versatility in the passing game as legit receiving weapons. And what I like about this dynamic here between Muth and Jonnu is that they're different types of guys. All right. Pat is more of a, savvy type of route runner, really good at identifying soft spots in the zone, really reliable hands, really good possession type tight end. And then you've got Jonnu, who's your dynamic yak threat. So your manufactured touches, your drags, your easy completions that turn into big yardage is what you're getting Jonnu Smith for here. And then Darnell Washington, is an excellent blocker that is also happening to have a really good offseason as well. So I expect this offense to use 13 personnel very, very heavily. Especially on first downs this year, which means just one receiver, by the way. DK Metcalf would be the only receiver on the field in those types of situations. But I do think that they will go to those. I also think this team could dabble with Darnell Washington at fullback, which would be a lot of fun as well. But, obviously with this move for Jonnu Smith, this team is making it abundantly clear. They want to beat the crap out of opposing defenses, and they want to, make that their offensive identity heading into the year. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Really do appreciate all of your guys' support. It's definitely possible the Steelers aren't done here and they make another signing. They might sign Justin Simmons. They might sign Gabe Davis is another report that came out from Jeremy Fowler today that they could be interested in. So make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already for more breaking news coverage on the black and gold as we get ready for training camp. And we got one here from Samson Miranda with a $10 super chat. Says, Jack, do you wish we got Brian Branch instead of Joey Porter Jr. in the draft a couple years back? How high do you think Porter's ceiling is? I think Porter's ceiling is really high. I really do. People sleep on Joey because he was dealing with some injuries last year. And because of that, he wasn't able to be as much of an impact as he was early on in the season. And then much of his first season as a starter here in Pittsburgh. But he's got some of the best press jam coverage out of any player in the National Football League because of his long arms and physicality. And we have seen him shut down legit number one receivers in this league very consistently when he's healthy. So I'm still a big believer in Joey Porter Jr. Does he grab too much? Yes, but so does guys like, Sauce Gardner, but so does guys like Marshawn Lattimore, other players in this league that are very physical corners. And most of the time they get away with it. And Joey's still learning the nuances of getting away with being grabby later on in the down. And I think heading into year 3, he's going to be just fine, guys. Like people are kind of panicking about Joey Porter Jr. Brian Branch is a better player than Joey is right now, but Joey absolutely has the physical skill set, in my opinion, to be a legit lockdown number one corner. He's shown flashes of that throughout his career. And when he's on, it allows the Steelers defense to rotate coverage away from him because they can just trust Joey on an island. So, he's somebody that I'm still a really big fan of. I still have a high level of belief in. The Steelers still have a high level of belief in. And I think that he's going to have a hell of a season heading into year 3 this year. And we got one from Carl. Says, which one improved more with this trade, the defense or the offense? Is a good question. I think the offense improved more because you're losing a player on defense in the trade as well, right? So it's like the difference between Jalen Ramsey and Minkah Fitzpatrick. I do think Ramsey's better, but it's not like a huge upgrade in terms of overall talent on your roster. But on offense, you add the player that this team really wanted. This team really wanted Jonnu Smith. They pretty much made that abundantly clear. They've been pursuing him for multiple weeks at this point. And the reason why that they pursued him is exactly the reasons we talked about. He is going to be an absolute yak monster. They are going to feed him screens. They're going to feed him short passing concepts. Aaron Rodgers loves his quick game. He loves his screen game, and Jonnu is going to be his weapon in that regard. He is big for somebody that moves as well as he does. And last year, he broke multiple Miami Dolphins tight end single season records last year with over 880 yards receiving, first down average per carry, 8 touchdowns, had over 100 targets. I expect him to be very heavily used in the screen game and as a manufactured touch type of tight end. That also meets the standards of an Arthur Smith offense in terms of run blocking. So, you're not going to be asking him to go in line and, dig up an edge rusher. Like, he's not going to be asked to do that. But he's going to be asked to take on much more realistic blocking assignments, and he's got the athletic traits to climb to the second and third levels of a defense and take on his blocking assignments. Like, the Steelers clearly have a plan for Jonnu Smith, and it's to use him very heavily because they are giving him this extension as well. We got another one here from P Breezy FN, says, do you think they use Cole Holcomb as trade bait for another piece? No, I think they're going to keep Cole Holcomb. That one's pretty easy for me. I think that they like him in the locker room. I think they like him as a rotational linebacker piece, and he's going to be competing with Malik Harrison for, I think, third linebacker type of reps this year. And we got one from Alex, says, how does this trade benefit us in the AFC? It makes the Steelers on offense very, very unique. Okay. Like, you look at the AFC, what are you competing with? You are competing with teams like the Chiefs, like the Bills, like the Ravens, teams that can really air it out and pass the football at a very high level. Bengals is another one as well. There's a lot of high-flying passing offenses in the AFC, right? So the Steelers are like, okay, well, we don't have any like high-end elite quarterback options available to us in the draft or free agency or via trade this offseason. So their plan has been to shift to have a completely different style of offense that's completely surrounded around the run game and being more physical and bigger than their opponents. All right. So their plan is to run a lot of 12 and 13 personnel, 2 and 3 tight end sets. And they want to have the blocking advantage on every play while also having the versatility to pass the football. And what Jonnu Smith, the addition of Jonnu Smith allows you to do is have 2 receiving threats at tight end on the field at all times. So you have that blocking advantage, that size advantage, that physicality advantage, while also having players that can fill legitimate roles as receivers in the Steelers offense. So, it's very unique because it's so big. No other starting offense in the NFL is going to be as big as the Pittsburgh Steelers is this year, and they're banking on that size and that physicality to give them an identity and give them a chance to compete with teams like the Chiefs and the Ravens and the Buffalo Bills. And especially when you pair that with the defense, which they hope is going to be top 5 in the league like it was last year before TJ Watt's injury. They're hoping that combination of bruising run game with versatile passing attack off of play action mixed with a ravenous pass rush to get after these elite quarterbacks in the AFC is going to be enough for the Steelers to compete with these high-flying groups. So let me know down there in the comments section, what is the better addition to the roster here? R for Ramsey, S for Smith. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section. I like both of them pretty much equally. I really like Ramsey's game. I really like Smith's game. I think they both bring something to this defense. So let me know what you guys think down there in the comments section, and click that subscribe button if you haven't already. We're going to have more Jalen Ramsey, Jonnu Smith coverage on this channel throughout the week, as well as any other coverage and any other breaking news that happens this week. So make sure you click that subscribe button if you haven't already. And until next time, guys, here we go, Steelers. All right, so let me know down there in the comments section, what was the better addition for the roster? Type R for Ramsey or type S for Smith. I think that it's hard for me to pick this because I think they're both good additions. I think I might have to go with Smith just because I think that Smith makes the offense better than Ramsey makes the defense better. But Ramsey is certainly somebody that brings versatility, that brings physicality, that brings just good damn football play to this defense. And the cap hit is so much lower for Ramsey than it is for a guy like Minkah. And you're getting a player that I think is better than Minkah at this point for a significantly less cap charge. So there's that. Kermit is my God coming in with a 5, my man. Says Calvin is going to look like a midget. Thanks for the coverage, Jack. Yeah, he's going to look tiny out there with all these big bodies out there, man. You got DK Metcalf, who's almost like he's built like a linebacker, and then you got Jonnu Smith, Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, who looks like another offensive lineman, Caleb Johnson, who's a big running back at 230 pounds. Yeah, Calvin is going to look like a little kid out there, man. That's a good point, Kermit. I didn't think it. By the way, Roman's going to look really small out there. Like he's 185 pounds. He's bigger than the 160-pound Calvin is. But yeah, man, those two receivers are going to look small next to all these tight ends. By the way, that might be why they feel a little bit more comfortable having these two smaller receivers in their wide receiver room, is because they got so much size outside of those two guys. So that's absolutely part of the reason why they're probably cool having two kind of smaller receivers as 2 and 3 in this wide receiver group. Then we got one from LT. You had a 10. What's up, LT? It says, I'm worried about communication in the secondary without Minkah, hoping that doesn't become an issue this season with him being a hub of communication on the defense for years. Yeah, man, Minkah, that's one of the benefits that he definitely had was, he sees things before they happen. But also Jalen is the type of guy that is like that. Like Jalen, you watch his film from especially 2021 when he won the Super Bowl with the Rams, where he was, I believe, the #1 graded corner in all of football. Like him playing in the nickel and, identifying what teams are doing before they do it is incredible. So he's got a lot of experience too. And the thing about the Steelers defense last year, part of the reason for the collapse was a lack of communication, even when Minkah was on the field, right? So obviously Minkah's contribution in that area wasn't enough. And really the biggest question with that is, can Patrick Queen, really take the reins as the green dot of this defense and be that guy that, is responsible for everyone doing their jobs, because it just wasn't the case last year. So that's going to be a big question mark, and probably the biggest question mark for me surrounding this defense this year is, does that secondary and second and third level communication get better than what it was than we saw it at the end of last season? If it doesn't, there's going to be issues again. But according to multiple reports, Gerald Alexander, the new DB coach, has been super, super adamant and on his P's and Q's about making sure people know what their responsibilities are with the dirty bunch looks, with the bunch looks, all the different stuff that we're seeing to kind of get people and defenses to get off their assignments. I think the Steelers are going to be a lot better in that regard, because I think the coaching in that regard is better heading into the year. All right, I'm going to take a little bit of a drink of water here. And make sure you guys click that subscribe button if you haven't already. Just a little bit of an update here for the people just joining us. The Pittsburgh Steelers have traded for both Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith in exchange for former All-Pro safety Minkah Fitzpatrick. There's also a late-round pick swap, as you guys can see on the screen right here, in 2027. So obviously the Steelers protected all of their 2026 draft picks. They really feel like they want to have all those picks heading into next year, and probably to load up on a trade up for a quarterback that they particularly like. But overall, guys, I think this makes the Steelers defense slightly better, and it makes the Steelers offense, quite a bit better, actually. I think that a lot of people are going to criticize the Steelers for maybe not going and getting a receiver instead, but I think it fits what the Steelers attack on offense wants to be this year. They want to be multiple. They want to, go to a bunch of wing formations. They want to put a lot of tight ends, a lot of bodies close to the line of scrimmage so that they can play bully ball essentially. And Jonnu Smith, with his ability to catch the football, and not only catch the football, but run with the football after he has the ball in his hands. One of the better yak threats in the National Football League with his size and athleticism combo. Had 8 touchdowns last year for the Miami Dolphins. That was a career high for him. And I am very, very excited to see what he looks like in this offense, because he makes the Steelers offense the most unique offense in the game, plain and simply. I mean, every single offense in the NFL, is spread heavy, lots of receivers on the field, pass heavy, all this different stuff, which is why the modern NFL defense has responded with a lot of too high safety coverages, with a lot of nickel, with a lot of dime, a lot of speed on the field. The Steelers, want to maintain that ability to throw the football, but they also want to take advantage of the lack of size that NFL defenses are used to playing with by going heavy. And, if you're expecting a lot of 3 wide receiver packages for the Steelers on offense this year, you're going to be disappointed because it's going to be a lot of 12. It's going to be a lot of 13 personnel. It's going to be a lot of big bodies on the field. And it's going to be a lot of running the football. All right. And that's going to be good on Aaron Rodgers because that's going to help you. That's going to help this team keep him fresh throughout the season. It's going to, keep the offense very multiple, and it's going to not allow opposing defenses to know what the Steelers are doing. I mean, what was the biggest problem with the Matt Canada offense, guys? It was the predictability. Like, there was literally formations that Matt Canada would have where he would only run one play out of that formation. And the defense knew, all right, they're in this formation, they're running this play, and they just smothered it. But with this, like, you can go to like a wing formation in 13 personnel or a wing formation in 12, and you can motion Jonnu Smith out into the slot or Pat Freiermuth out to the slot. You can do a lot of different things, and then from those formations, you can do a bunch of different plays. You can run counter, outside zone, inside zone, split zone in the run game. And then you can also run the play action bootleg game off of that. You can go 5-step drop with Rodgers in a quick game concept. The defense will just have no idea what the Pittsburgh Steelers are doing because they're going to have very specific sets of formations that they run, and they completely spam those formations, and you just don't know what's coming. There's like 5 or 6 different things the Steelers could do out of that same formation, whereas the old Steelers offense was the exact opposite. So, will this work? I can't guarantee you that it will. I think that it's a very valiant effort from the Steelers to do something different because they understood they can, if you're trying to beat Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson at their game of bombing it down the field with a quarterback that's not as good as those guys, you're going to lose. All right. Like, that's just the case of the matter. But like, if you can do what the Philadelphia Eagles did last year, where you can have a bruising run game, and you can have an elite defense, and you have a quarterback that doesn't make mistakes, doesn't turn the football over, and manages the game at a high level. I mean, we just saw what the Philadelphia Eagles did to the Kansas City Chiefs in the Super Bowl, right? They killed them. Now, the Steelers have to have a lot go right for them this year for them to be on the same level as the Eagles from a roster perspective. The offensive line has to play well this year. Jonnu Smith needs to be worth it. Pat Freiermuth has to play well. Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin need to, at least one of them has to arise as a legit number 2 receiver. TJ Watts has to stay healthy. Like, there's a lot of question marks that do need to be answered in the affirmative here for the Steelers to have a shot, but at least they have a shot, and they are thinking outside the box here. And they are, they're not just following the normal NFL blueprint of how to build an offense. Cause it's kind of like the line in Moneyball, guys. One of my favorite movies, Moneyball, when Billy Beane says, if we try to play like the Yankees in here, we will lose to the Yankees out there. And he's right about that. And he was right about that, which is why they shifted their mentality. And now the Steelers are shifting their mentality because it's like, well, if we try to beat Patrick Mahomes at his game with Aaron Rodgers, a 41, soon to be 42-year-old Aaron Rodgers, we're going to lose to the Chiefs. All right. So we have to not play like them. We have to play a different style of ball. We have to go out there and we have to try and bully the shit out of these teams, not only on offense, but on defense too. Like, don't give Mahomes time to throw. Like the Eagles showed last year, that's how you beat the Chiefs and Mahomes, is you don't give him time to throw. You don't give Josh Allen time to throw. You don't give Lamar Jackson time to throw. They've built, in my opinion, the best defensive pass rush in the National Football League. And if they can pair that with this bruising, heavy offense that can move the football in a number of different ways, it's interesting, and I think it could work. I call me crazy, guys, but I think that this offensive philosophy led by Arthur Smith is one that's really starting to develop and come into its own, and I'm excited. I'm excited to see what they're going to do on the offensive side of the ball. And my prediction right now, this will be the best Steelers offense we have seen in a long time. So grade this trade for the Steelers, A, B, C, D, or F. Let me know what you guys think down there in the comment section. Again, guys, we are taking questions all throughout the show here. We will stay live as long as you guys get those super chat questions in. Definitely a lot to talk about, a lot to speculate on after this move. Obviously, it sucks to have Minkah Fitzpatrick and not be in the building anymore. He's such an awesome player to have. Great person, hard worker. Aaron Rodgers this week on Pat McAfee was talking about, how intelligent, how great of a high football IQ he has. to not have that guy in your locker room, essentially a player coach on the field, it sucks. It really does. But you're getting another player in Jalen Ramsey, who in my opinion is a better player than Minkah is right now. He's more versatile than Minkah is right now. And, I'm just going to compare the PFF grades between these two guys from last year. So Minkah Fitzpatrick last year, obviously PFF grading is not gospel. I just want to say that up front, but it's a tool that we can use because it is based on film study from the PFF team. Minkah Fitzpatrick has a 65.2 PFF grade from last year. That is 44th out of 98 safeties in the NFL. So that's not terrific. But then last year, Jalen Ramsey, for example, let me see if I can find him. Is he still on the Dolphins page here? He is a 76.9, so that's a higher grade, and that was 11th out of 116 corners last year. So he was one of the best corners in football last year, whereas Minkah, according to the grading, was like a mid-level safety. So I think you're getting a better player at the position that he plays. And you guys can see last year, 2 interceptions, 11 PBUs, obviously more production from Ramsey than what we saw from Minkah last year. Not to say Minkah's a bad player. I'm definitely not saying that. But, Minkah was a very expensive player against the cap. Jalen is actually not going to be expensive against the cap for the Steelers. They are giving him a little bit of a pay raise. So the team is going to be giving him quite a bit of cash this year. But in terms of the base salary and the option bonus that he's getting this year, it doesn't add up against the cap all that much. I believe it might be 5.9 million, it might be slightly more than that. We'll have to see when the official contract numbers come out on him. But he's not going to be an expensive player against the cap like Minkah was. Minkah was slated to get, I think it was like a $22.5 million cap hit for the Steelers this year. 15.5 million of that now goes to the Miami Dolphins in his base salary. So you save money against the cap here with this move. And it seems like the Steelers are using that cap to be able to pay Jonnu Smith, or at least part of that to pay Jonnu Smith. And it's just very obvious from the beginning here that, Jonnu was kind of the offensive weapon that this team wanted to add. It wasn't Amari Cooper, wasn't Keenan Allen. We hadn't really heard anything regarding those two over the entire offseason, frankly. Obviously, we didn't hear anything about Chris Olave or Terry McLaurin or Romeo Dobbs or Trey Palmer, all the guys that we heard connected to the Steelers. None of those things really came to fruition. And it just seems to me like Jonnu was the guy that they really honed in on, and they also really wanted Ramsey. And the Dolphins said, if you want to get both these guys, you got to give us Minkah in return. And the Steelers were like, you know what? We like Minkah. In fact, we love Minkah, but his production hasn't been the same. We might be trading him next offseason anyway, and we can get his contract off our books. I understand why the Steelers made this move. I'm sad that Minkah's not a part of this team. I love cheering for him. He's an awesome guy, awesome teammate. Steelers lost a good person in their organization today, but Jalen Ramsey in the black and gold with that visor. Are you kidding me, man? This is gonna be chills. This is gonna be aura out the wazoo. Hopefully it's good production out the wazoo too. But man, seeing Jalen Ramsey playing in this defense, it's gonna be fun. It's gonna be a fun ride. All right. Well, Sam, can you actually get on screen here for a second? I gotta answer a text here. If you want to give some shout outs in the chat, if that's possible. But all right. So Sam is gonna give some shout outs here. Get your questions in the chat. I'm gonna take a short break here, and I'll be back momentarily. I gotta take care of some business here.
All right, I'm unmuting my mic here, so we'll see if it works. Oh, it does. It's very loud, though. That's a little bit better there. Obviously working through a lot here during today's live Zoom show. Jack Sperry will be back momentarily. In the meantime, like I said, if you want to get in line, be sure to send in a super chat. You can get your question in line. A defense-altering trade for the Steelers as Jalen Ramsey comes in. Minkah Fitzpatrick comes out. Let me know in the comments. I want you to know. I want you to grade the trade for me. A, B, C, D, or F in the comments section. We'll get Jack back on screen
Sam, I'm good whenever you're ready.
A little bit. Oh, he just told me he's ready. That works out. All right. Well, that was quick. Sorry. Hopefully you enjoyed me. Here's Jack.
All right, I'm back on screen here. Sorry, I had to take care of a little something there. Shout out to producer Sam, using his day today, early portion of the day to help us out. Coop's got some NBA stuff that he has to take care of today. So shout out to producer Sam. Spam those Sams. Yeah, spam those Sams, in the chat. Yeah, Sam's got stuff to do too. So shout out to Sam for putting some of his things on hold today to help us out. But Sam is putting his day on hold here. Make sure you guys get those questions down there in the chat. We'll stay live for as long as you guys want me to stay live here. You guys have already been fantastic, but we got over 500 people in the chat talking Steelers football here. The people saying trade for Tyreek, I feel like they probably would have included him in this deal if he was available and if that's who they wanted. I think a lot of Steelers fans are unfortunately going to be upset here that they're not going to get a big name receiver. I think at the very most, what they'll do is they'll get Gabe Davis in free agency. Obviously, they showed a little bit of interest in him, bringing him in for a free agency visit. He brings run blocking. That's what he brings. He doesn't have the best ball skills. He does bring size, but he's not a fantastic route runner. He's had some big games in his career with Josh Allen and the Bills, but he was atrocious last year with Jacksonville. But for a team that obviously is prioritizing size, they're prioritizing size. They're prioritizing running the football, run blocking, stuff like that. It wouldn't shock me if they bring in Gabe Davis, especially if they don't feel like Roman Wilson is ready to take on those full-time wide receiver 2 duties. But as I was talking about, so we got an update here from Adam Schefter on the Jalen Ramsey contracts. As Steelers are taking on the bulk of their new cornerback, Jalen Ramsey's $26.6 million contract per sources. Dolphins responsible for a smaller portion. So to kind of break this down, guys, the Dolphins already are on the hook for everything they've already paid to Ramsey. So essentially their signing bonus to him and then any restructures that they had for him. And apparently the Dolphins are taking on a portion of the remaining cash that is still there as well. So the Steelers obviously taking on a large portion of it, but this doesn't necessarily affect the cap. You don't look at that 26.6 number and think that that's what's going to be going up against the cap. Okay. The Steelers are just on the hook they're probably going to be on the hook for the raise that they're giving him. I'm guessing that's going to be in the form of some sort of signing bonus. Maybe we'll see how all that kind of distros out, but the Steelers will be on the hook for somewhere probably close to $20 million in cash, and then anywhere between like $6 million to maybe $8 million against the cap this year. That's probably how everything is going to be playing out for that deal. And then with the Jonnu Smith deal, they are extending him. They're giving him a 1-year extension worth $12 million. So Jonnu's cap hit will not be that big this year either, because I would assume that they're just on the hook for the base salary for him this year. So overall, if anything, I think the Steelers probably save cap space here, because they're dumping $15.5 million in base salary to the Dolphins with the Minkah deal. And even though they're going to be paying more cash to these 2 players this year, the cap hit, I think, is actually going to be lower for these 2 players combined than it would have been for Minkah Fitzpatrick alone. So they're saving money and they're adding another player while remaining the same level of defensive talent. So, if not more, because I do think Jalen is better at this point than Minkah is. So the one aspect of this trade I don't like is that Minkah is a part of the deal, and I didn't want to see him go. I wanted to, when Mike Tomlin talks about how he wants his players he wants certain players to have the confetti rain down on them in Pittsburgh. Minkah was one of those guys that he would talk about. TJ was one of them. Cam was another one of them. Minkah was another one. And there was some talk about the Steelers potentially trading Minkah Fitzpatrick, not only this offseason, but potentially next year as well. So the Steelers probably felt like, hey, we can get Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith, the defensive target and the offensive target that we've been targeting for multiple weeks at this point. And all we have to do is give away somebody that we're going to save money by getting rid of, and somebody that's been declining over the last 2 years. I don't think it's a bad move for the Pittsburgh Steelers, man. I really don't. Ian Rappaport said this also about the contract. The Dolphins had previously paid Jalen Ramsey $4 million this offseason, and they added another $3 million more to facilitate the trade for a total of $7 million. So out of that 26.6 in the cash, the Dolphins are on the hook for 7 of that. The Steelers will pay the rest of the 26.6 million this year. So essentially, the Steelers are on the hook for around 19-20 million in cash this year, and I'm assuming the cap hit will be no greater than $8 million. All right. So, did we get any more super chats here? I don't think we did. So we're gonna go kind of last call here. If we don't get any super chats in the next 4 minutes, so that'll be 1:25 on the East Coast, we're gonna call it a show. But if you guys have more that you want to discuss, you want to keep this party going, feel free to send in those super chats, get those questions in. Still got over 500 people watching live as we continue to get more information on this Jalen Ramsey trade. Obviously, it's a blockbuster move because 3 players are being moved here. It's very rare that multiple players are included in any NFL trade, let alone one this late into the offseason. So this is definitely one of the more unique moves in Steelers history. There's our shot clock down there. We got 3 minutes for you guys to get any potential questions in, and we'll stay live as long as the super chats keep coming in. If you guys are joining us late here, we've got breaking news this morning, or now it's in the afternoon. Jalen Ramsey and Jonnu Smith are now Pittsburgh Steelers, and Minkah Fitzpatrick has moved on to the Miami Dolphins, back to where he started his career out of Alabama. There's also a late round pick swap in 2027 that is involved in this deal. The Steelers get a 7th round pick in 27, whereas the Dolphins will get a 5th rounder in 2027. So you guys have heard my take on this from the very beginning of this live stream. We've been live for quite a while now, but I think that this move does make the Steelers defense slightly better on paper. They still have technically a hole on their defense at free safety. Maybe the Steelers hope that Juan Thornhill is a good enough player this offseason for them to be able to fill that hole. But it's also possible they could bring in a guy like Justin Simmons. And, it's going to be interesting to see what the Steelers' plan is for Jalen Ramsey. Do they plan on just playing him at safety and just making that transition full-time and playing Beanie in the slot? Maybe that's what they do. Maybe they still bring in Mike Hilton to start at slot corner while they move Jalen Ramsey to safety. That's another possibility that we haven't talked about on today's show. But then also on offense, I think it solidifies that the Steelers' vision for this offense this year is to play in heavy personnel for most of the time. 12 and 13 personnel, 2 and 3 tight ends on the field at any given time. Using Darnell Washington as a true blocker. Wouldn't be surprised if they use him at the fullback position at times this offseason as well. And it also kind of lowers the need for this team at the wide receiver position. They got DK Metcalf, but I think they like Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin III enough where they're not going to bring in another true threat at this position, because they really like Calvin, and Calvin had a really efficient season last year. You guys have heard me talk about Calvin ad nauseum on this channel, how I think he's one of the most underrated receivers in the game. I compare his skill set to a guy like Darnell Mooney. And then Roman Wilson is somebody that's going to be a slot technician for you. I think that he can play as your number 2 receiver in your 2 wide receiver sets. I was a big fan of his coming out of Michigan, and I think that I still, have a relatively high level of belief in him. And then if he stinks and he's just not it, you do have Robert Woods in this room that is a longtime veteran, good blocker, better than Van Jefferson is what I'll say. But then make sure you guys click that subscribe button. We do have a super chat coming in here. So this will probably be the last super chat of the day, I'd say, unless another one comes in at the end here. But Steelers Country 422, that's Shane Sabona, says, "Hey Jack, besides Justin Simmons, who else is available to sign? Also, it looks like it was an even swap in money for Minkah and Ramsey." So yeah, money and cap charge are 2 different things. That's something that you're going to have to understand about this trade, is that the Steelers will have to pay Jalen Ramsey a pretty hefty option bonus. That's going to be that the cap charge is going to be distributed, I believe, over 3 or 4 years. here in Pittsburgh. I can't remember the exact details there. But because of that, the cap hit's going to be lower than the amount of cash that they'll be giving Ramsey this year. So just keep that in mind. We'll see what the official numbers look like once those are officially released. But, I do think that at the end of it here, the Steelers will have will have more cap space after this deal than before it, at least for this season. They will have Jalen Ramsey, those cap charges on the books for the next few seasons, but they'll be pretty small. They'll be like $6 and $7 million a piece. So I don't expect those to be like back-breaking type of cap charges, even if he's not on the team. But, I think in terms of 2025 cap, the Steelers, pretty sure, are saving money on this deal. Unless they restructured Ramsey's contract in a way where that's not the case, and I'm not aware of that. But we shall see on that. Then to answer your other question there, Shane, in terms of the other defensive backs they could bring in, if they want to play Ramsey at safety, they could bring in Mike Hilton. And Mike Hilton was an awesome player for this defense for 4 years, his first 4 years of his career in 2017 through 2020. Then he goes to the Bengals for 4 years. He's still a very good player. I'm kind of surprised he hasn't signed a contract, to be honest with you. And if people have been talking about moving Jalen Ramsey to safety for a couple of years now, if they wanted to make that full commitment and then bring in Mike Hilton as your starting slot, I think that could be something that works. Or if you have the vision for Ramsey to play corner for you, then you could get a guy like Justin Simmons, who you discuss in that super chat. But then also another option is Jordan Poyer to keep your eye on, because Poyer's a free safety, and Poyer has done ayahuasca retreats with Aaron Rodgers. He's a very, very good friend of his. And it's very possible that they might ask Rodgers, about him. And if they ask Rodgers about Poyer, my guess is Rodgers would be completely on board bringing him in. We do have a little bit of an update here from Jordan Schultz. It says, since 2017, only 2 defensive backs have been named first-team All-Pro 3 times, Jalen Ramsey and Minkah Fitzpatrick. Today, they were traded for each other. Yeah, man, that's kind of crazy. Obviously, Minkah has had some excellent seasons here in Pittsburgh in his prime. He was arguably the best free safety in football. But I think the last 2 years have kind of shown that he's not the same player that he used to be. I don't think that a first-team All-Pro season is still in the cards for him. If it does, I'm happy for him. He certainly deserves it. He works his ass off. And he's just a good person that just has incredible football character. So I'm definitely going to be rooting for him in Miami, but his production did go down. I do think Ramsey is better at what he does than what Minkah does at this point. And then the fact that you're also adding Jonnu Smith to this deal, who is an awesome defensive or offensive player, to complement Pat Freiermuth's kind of possession type of tight end skill set, and then continue this kind of trend in Pittsburgh where we're going towards a lot of heavy personnel packages, 12 and 13 and 22 personnel. And it's going to be a lot of fun to see Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth in the same offense, along with Darnell Washington. That is kind of the identity of this football team as we stand here today, is, we're going to pound the crap out of you both on offense and defense. And if you don't like that, too bad. And we're going to force you to play a brand of football that you're not used to playing against other teams. That's another element here that I think is going a little bit underrated, guys, is that, teams are going to be forced to play with multiple linebackers and play heavy defensive personnel against the Steelers. If they don't, then the Steelers are going to have a very, very obvious blocking advantage in the run game, which is going to help out the run game. But then also, the defenses are used to playing in nickel. Like, they're used to practicing in nickel. They're used to practicing in dime. They don't go to their base formations very often. And they're going to have to try and sustain a high level of defensive play throughout an entire football game against this Steelers offense in formations that they're not used to playing. So playing the Steelers offense this year as a defense is going to be a unique experience. And it's going to be something that these defenses are not used to. So I'm excited about that for sure. And, I think that there's going to be a lot of Steelers fans that are going to lament the fact that they, traded away George Pickens and they didn't replace him with another, big name receiver, and that they're probably going to go into the season with Roman Wilson and Calvin Austin III as their options as the number 2 and number 3 receivers. But what you have to understand here, guys, is that the tight ends in the tight end room here are extensions of the wide receiver room for this version of the Steelers offense. All right. Pat Freiermuth is a legitimate receiving threat. Jonnu Smith is a legitimate receiving threat. So even though the Steelers may not have a big name number 2 receiver in their offense right now, like by the end of the season, you might be talking about Jonnu Smith and Pat Freiermuth as one of, if not the best tight end duos in the league. And then you have Darnell Washington as your third tight end, where on early downs, you put him in there as pretty much a 6th offensive lineman that can also be eligible to catch passes. And, this might be the best tight end room in the league. It really might be. And the Steelers want to kind of combat a positionless style of defense that you're seeing from the Jesse Minters of the world and the Mike McDonalds of the world and all these guys that, play safeties and linebackers in very hybrid style roles. And, they're trying to hybridize that to the offensive side of the ball, where you have these players that are big enough to be valuable run blocking assets, but also athletic enough and talented enough and skilled enough as receivers to be legitimate threats in that regard as well. So, I think I'm very excited for this. You guys know how I feel about Jonnu Smith and Jalen Ramsey. I've given the green light and said I would love to add both of these players in previous videos over the last several weeks. And the fact that they're adding both of them here is pretty good, especially given the fact that you're getting Minkah Fitzpatrick's contract off your books. I think that I understand why the Steelers did this as much as I'm going to miss Minkah Fitzpatrick here in Pittsburgh. All right, well, I think we're going to wrap it up here, guys. Big shout out to producer Sam for scrambling to help us get live this morning. If we get more news on the Steelers front, if they sign Justin Simmons, if they sign Mike Hilton, if they sign Gabe Davis in the weeks to come, we're going to have breaking news coverage for you guys. I'm going to have more extensive coverage on Ramsey and Smith and what you guys can expect from them on the Steelers roster here in videos to come later this week. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. Big shout out to producer Sam again. I will see you guys next time. And until then, guys, here we go, Steelers.